Hello, this is Charles Sabo. I'm coming to you on webinar number 9 on going over the book of Revelation of Jesus Christ. This will be covering chapter 8. I've already done the first 7 chapters as well as an introduction to this point. This is a book that I'm writing, commentary on the book of Revelation of Jesus Christ. I'm still writing the book. I'm on middle of chapter 19 right now, almost finished. And so I'm bringing to you a teaching that will help you understand things better. Eventually, the book will be published. It might be towards the end of 2020 before you see it in print. But for now, doing the online webinar to be able to teach as the Lord has led me to do on His teachings He's given to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read from my PDF of my book. You'll see some typos in there. I still got to do some editing on it, so please forgive me on that. But I will teach you the way what he's taught me, so that you'll have a better understanding of this book. And so I'll read from it as I go, and then maybe it'll flash to you just the PDF. You'll be able to see it, and then I'll come back and forth, expressing some things that are important to you. So bear with me. I'm going to go right to that PDF right now and start reading. So we'll get started here. You can see I'm in chapter 8. All right, so I'll begin reading. From this point in John's visions, things begin to get more complicated. From the point of opening the seventh seal in chapter 8 until the end of chapter 13, the declaration of the mark of the beast, are events that happen at the midpoint of the 7 years. The 7 trumpet judgments will begin the second half of the 7 years, which begins the great tribulation spoken of by Jesus in Matthew 24:21. These first 6 trumpets will sound off in succession, with very little time to elapse between them. From chapter 10, verse 11 through chapter 11, verse 14, the timeline of the 7 years is brought back to day 1 of the 7 years. And God, just keep in mind that God does that because He's showing you the first 6 seals, and He's showing you the events in heaven and the visions of what will be happening on the earth. He didn't want to throw another thing happening, just confuse you. So there's certain things that have to start on day 1 that He's going to go back and tell you are starting on day 1, just so you know, because it sets up what's going to happen on day 1261. He had to tell you about these. And so as I get to those chapters, you'll better understand this. Okay, where was I? Then chapter 11, verse 15 through 19 continues the events of the midpoint of the 7 years. Chapters 12 and 13 reveal events which will occur at the result of the abomination of desolation at the midst of the 7 years. Chapter 14 then begins to cover events that will occur in the second half of the 7 years, which eventually leads to the second coming of Christ. So that's kind of giving you a little preview of the second half there. So I'm going to continue moving here. All right. So we're going to continue, just go right into verse 1. And when he had opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven about a space of a half an hour. When Jesus will open the 7th seal of the book of rolls, all of the singing and praising of God in heaven will come to a stop. It is nearly obvious that God will have instructed all of heaven to remain silent for a space of a half an hour of earth time. The reason is not stated, but can be concluded to be the halftime event of the 7 years. If we read ahead and see the noise does not happen until the golden censer has been cast to the earth, we can understand why this silence had occurred. The ceremony of the golden censer seems to be the key point of the silence. The second half of the 7 years is about to begin. The great tribulation will begin with the 7 trumpet judgments, and the earth will be plagued with events never before experienced. The 7 cherubim get their trumpets from God and get themselves ready, as verse 2 and 6 indicates. Now, I said cherubim. Just a brief theology study here on cherubim. There are only 2 types of angels expressed in the entire Bible. There are cherubim and seraphim. Seraphim are always seen around God's throne. Anytime God is seen, his throne is seen, there are cherubim around it. Anytime there are messengers sent out, these are cherubim. The angelos means messenger. Cherubim, seraphim. It has to be clear. You have to understand that. So it's important as you're studying the book of Revelation, who are cherubim, who are seraphim. Okay, and as I did a study on chapter 4 and 5 and on, the four beasts around the throne are the entire population of the seraphim angels. They are an allegorical representation of the four types of seraphim, but they're all seraphim, the entire population. Just like the 24 elders are an allegorical representation of the entire bride of Christ. You have to understand that. It's very important theology to understand the book of Revelation. Okay, so there's a brief study, so you can be updated. You'd have to see me explain this in chapter 4 and 5 to be able to understand it better. All right, verse 2. And I saw the seven angels which stood before God, and to them were given seven trumpets. John saw the seven cherubim angels come to God's throne, and he gave them their trumpets. The silence continues until the half an hour had expired. Verse 3, and another angel came and stood at the altar, having a golden censer. And there was given unto him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all saints upon the golden altar, which was before the throne. As the half an hour of silence continued, John saw another cherub angel come to the golden altar at the throne of God. He prepared the golden censer with much incense, which he was given. We can see that the incense represents the prayers of all the saints of the earth who had not yet been killed. Okay. By the way, cherub is singular for cherubim. Seraph is singular for seraphim. Just so I don't know if I explained that. Revelation 8:4. And the smoke of the incense which came with the prayers of the saints ascended up before God out of the angel's hand. The cherub angel offered the burning incense, most likely by waving it in front of the golden altar for a period of time. The silence during this time would be deafening. God was recognizing the prayers of those who were still left on the earth, whom he calls his own, right before he pours his incredible wrath upon the earth. So here we have it. The incense, the aromas, the prayers coming up from the earth, all of the suffering, the praising, the celebration of the Lord, prayers of the saints coming out to God. So God's recognizing that they're there right here in this segment before he starts pouring his wrath on the wicked. Now keep in mind, he's not going to be pouring his wrath on those saints. Once you give your life to the Lord down there, you're not one of those wicked getting the wrath of God. But he's recognizing who he has down there at this time with this event. It's recognizing the saints. He knows they're there. And verse 5. And the angel took the censer, filled it with fire of the altar, and cast it into the earth. And there were voices and thunders and lightnings and an earthquake. Remember that earthquake right there. And as the half hour of silence came to an end, the cherub angel with the golden censer filled it with fire, which is continuously burning at God's altar. He cast it to the earth, and the silence was over. There were voices, multiple thunder, multiple lightning, and an earthquake. The second half of the 7 years had begun. Verse 6. And the seven angels which had the seven trumpets prepared themselves to sound. The countdown is nearing to the end of the 30 minutes while the seven cherubim get into position. Right as the golden censer hits the earth, and after the voices, multiple thunders, multiple lightning, and the earthquake, the first cherub angel will begin to blow the first trumpet. The second half of the 7 years will begin. Verse 7. And the first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth. And a third part of the trees was burnt up, and all green grass was burnt up. The second half of the 7 years, 3.5 years times 360 days will have begun. That's day 1261, day one of that second half. The first of the seven cherubim sounds, the first trumpet. The fiery hail mixed with blood falls to the ground of the earth. History shows that God used fiery hail against Egypt in Exodus 9:22 through 25, but there was no blood mixed in. And I'll read Exodus 9:25. And the hail, there we go, and the hail smote throughout the land of Egypt, and all was in the field, both man and beast, and the hail smote every herb of the field and brake every tree of the field. Okay, notice there's no blood. In the case with the fiery hail mixed with blood, here in the 7 years, it will fall upon the entire earth. It will burn up 1/3 of all trees of the earth and will burn all the grass. This represents a problem for the wildlife, which depend on the grass for food. Meanwhile, the tree-dwelling animals and birds will lose 1/3 of their homes. All right, 1/3 of the trees. Food will become harder to find since the vegetation had been killed, while animals will become scarcer to hunt. And this red line is just part of the software. I didn't mean for that to be there. It won't be in my book as far as a line through it. I'll remove that when it comes down to it. Revelation 8, verse 8. And the second angel sounded, and it were a great mountain, as it were a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea, and the third part of the sea became blood. This particular trumpet judgment is specific to one location on the earth. There is a mountain on the earth set next to an ocean or sea, which could fall into the ocean and cause a monstrous mega tsunami. Such a place exists off the western coast of Africa. There is a 47-kilometer long wedge-shaped island of La Palma, which is a northwest part of the Canary Islands. It is composed of two large volcanic centers. It is obvious that any mountain that is burning with fire is most likely a volcano. It seems that God has put its very active volcano positioned perfectly to cause a mega tsunami. It will destroy 1/3 of the life within the Atlantic Ocean, and you'll see that in verse 9, and cause 1/3 of the Atlantic Ocean to be full of blood, and it's upon its tremendous force on the water. Okay, that's what it says here. All right, so here's a illustration of, here's Las Palmas right here, Las Palmas, and you can see here's 1 hour after the volcano falls into the ocean. 300-foot wave tsunami hits Africa. Here's 3 hours out. All right. And then here's 6 hours out. United Kingdom gets 16 to 23-foot waves because the angle is a little different. 130 to 600 to 160-foot high waves 8 hours after the volcano hits the ocean. 650-mile-an-hour it will travel, and up to 12.5 miles inland when it hits. Brazil, same thing down here. All of the northeastern part of South America. All right, here's a kind of a airplane view of the island of La Palma in the Canary Islands. So kind of upsetting, but it's pretty amazing that God has put this here. If you Google it, you'll read about it. You'll see that this is going to happen. They anticipate this happening. Scientists have been studying it. They know it's going to happen. It's going to be a major event someday, catastrophic. And the world, half the world, most of the world doesn't know about it, but it will happen. And obviously it's going to happen during the 7 years. Verse 9. And third part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and third part of all ships were destroyed. Now, it could be third part of all ships in all the oceans, but it's singular here for sea. So I guess we can say the Atlantic Ocean in that sea is that sea that has 1/3 part of the creatures. The result of the mega tsunami will kill 1/3 of all sea creatures and destroy 1/3 of all ships on the ocean. This explains the accumulation of so much blood, which it said in verse 8. The third part of the sea became blood. I think it's going to be because of the tremendous impact of this. It's going to cause the blood. It's going to just whales and humans, and it's going to be a lot of blood. And verse 10. And the third angel sounded the horn, the trumpet, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of water. When interpreting Revelation 8:10, one needs to look from John's eyes. As he saw the vision of the star falling and burning as a lamp, obviously a star would be thousands of times bigger than the Earth. One star would evaporate the Earth when it even got close. So most likely John was not seeing an actual star. Can we understand that science? Stars are so big, and the Earth would just evaporate. We can conclude that John saw a bright light falling to the Earth, which could have been a huge meteor, or it could have been a nuclear warhead. If John saw this in the night sky, the light would be even brighter, burning as it were a lamp. John had only experienced seeing shooting stars while watching from the Earth at night. With the Zechariah 5 prophecy of God's judgment using nuclear missiles, I believe the star was one of many nuclear warheads falling to the Earth. When he saw a nuclear warhead shooting through the sky, he saw a very bright light. He then saw one land on the Earth, and it destroyed the local rivers and waters. Okay, so he saw that. He could not experience the entire exchange of warheads over the entire planet. He couldn't see it all. The Lord had told him that they destroyed 1/3 of the Earth's water supply, just as the Lord had told him that the name of the star was Wormwood. The fountains of water should be concluded to be the underground springs, which come above ground as fountains. Okay, is that understood? I mean, come on now. These aren't man-made fountains. The underground springs shoot up as fountains when you dig a well. If anybody's ever dug a well, they would see the water come up. That's the underground water supply. That's what's being affected here by Wormwood. All right. Here's what John would see: a falling star, a nuclear warhead. Now, verse 11. And the name of the star is called Wormwood, and 1/3 of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. Because nuclear warheads had not yet been thought of nor invented, the Lord gave John a name to call these falling stars, nuclear warheads. Wormwood is what we should call a nuclear warhead according to this passage. The reality of this is obvious because one falling radioactive meteor cannot fall on 1/3 of the planet's rivers in one clean hit. It would be several at many locations to accomplish this. If this meteor was big enough to engulf 1/3 of the planet's rivers, the entire Earth would be destroyed upon impact. Think about it, how big that meteor would be to destroy 1/3 of all of the water supply on the Earth. 1/3. This is clearly many hitting the Earth, while John only saw one. If it was the Lord who gave him the information of the results that these caused, I mean, it's only he only saw one, and the Lord, it was the Lord who gave him the information of the results of all of them hitting. All right, he gave him, it called it Wormwood, and it affected 1/3 of the water supplies. All right, so man has made assumptions here when they should have. They need to use some logic. So come on now, 1/3 of the water supply. It means this thing's big, and if it's a single, well, first of all, stars are going to evaporate the Earth, right? So a single meteor, upon impact, 1/3 of the Earth gets hit. The Earth is going to just blow up. It's going to be blown in pieces. All right, so that's not happening. So John's seeing one hit the Earth and exploding, and then he's being told by the Lord. John's not seeing the water get turned bitter. He's not seeing people 1/3 of the place be bitter and the men dying. He's not seeing that. He's being told. This is what the Lord's telling him. Granted, this is visions that he's seeing, but think of all the time it would take for John to see the effects of men drinking water from the 1/3 of the water supply, turning bitter, and dying. It would take a lapse of time. So John is being given a vision, and the Lord is putting in his heart of what is happening. All right, it has to happen that way. Otherwise, it would be quite a vision of manifestation to see the vision over a elapsed period of time. The earth will have 1/3 of its water supply smitten with radioactivity. 1/3 of all fish will have been destroyed, while potentially most of the birds due to the nuclear fallout. How do I know this? Zephaniah 1:3 says, I will consume the fowls of the heaven and fishes of the sea. Keep in mind that the mega tsunami will have already killed 1/3 of the fish of the Atlantic Ocean, Revelation 8:8-9. John was not given a number of the people who will have died because of the bitter radioactive waters. At this point in the timeline, water will have become scarce as well as food. Many will drink of the water out of desperation, and they will die. But bad tasting water does not kill someone. Notice it says bitter. So bitter water doesn't kill you. Now, granted, over time, maybe it's got some dysentery in it or whatever, but it's not dysentery we're talking about. It's not bacteria. It's a condition of the water. The condition of the water is what kills them. It's radioactivity. Wormwood caused it. Radioactiveness. It's nuclear fallout. All right. Nuclear bombs hitting all over the earth. And this third trumpet judgment is the beginning of a nuclear war upon the planet. It is inevitable to happen because God has declared that it will come to pass. There is a prophecy in Zechariah 5 which has been misinterpreted by many theologians. Translators of the scriptures have misused the Hebrew text and substituted a different meaning to various words used by the prophet Zechariah. And what am I talking about? Pay attention. This is important. I learned this about 8-9 years ago. Opened my eyes. Zechariah 5. Never read Zechariah 5, but an online video host had shown me this video, and opened my eyes. And since then, I being a theologian, being an eschatologist, he's absolutely right. There's no other way you can interpret this passage other than the mistranslations that kind of deceive people. So pay attention. Zechariah 5:1. Then I turned and lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, a flying roll. In Zechariah 5:1, the prophet Zechariah was shown a roll which was flying through the air. English translations, the NIV, NSAB, ESV, etc., have revised God's word and substituted this word as to be a scroll. The word roll from the original Hebrew text is translated from the word Megillah, which is translated as a small roll, writing, or book. The word scroll is only used in one place in the Old Testament, and that is in Isaiah 34:4. Isaiah used the Hebrew word sefer, which was then translated by the King James translators to be a scroll, which was a very similar definition. Historically, a scroll was a complete book rather than a roll being a small segment of a book. So one will find that there is a difference between a roll and a scroll when they review historically what each one represents. A scroll is a document or book that has two rolls together. The word roll is a single cylinder of paper for a small document. One can even recall the use in everyday terms when one is to roll something up. They roll it in a single cylinder of paper or material. I take my toilet paper off of a roll and not a scroll. Kind of humorous, but yeah. I mean, in reality, that's what we call it, a roll of toilet paper. A book in ancient times consisted of a single long strip of paper or parchment, which was usually kept rolled on a stick and was unrolled when a person wished to read it. As the ancient script was unrolled to read it, the open end would roll up into its own roll, causing it to be a scroll with a double roll. Here's an illustration of a scroll right there, and the illustration of ancient rolls. You can see a little bit different, huh? 2 rolls, 1 roll. All right. The important distinction referenced in Zechariah 5:1 makes a tremendous difference when one is attempting to interpret this chapter in Zechariah. Zechariah was not seeing an ancient scroll when he saw this vision. He was looking at a single roll. Okay? And then, let's see here. Okay. As we look at verse 2, in Zechariah 5. And he said unto me, what seest you? And I answered, I see a flying roll. Doesn't say scroll, to roll. And the length thereof is 20 cubits, and the breadth thereof 10 cubits. In Zechariah 5:2, Zechariah answered that he saw a flying roll. I certainly hope that I don't have to explain this difference in aerodynamics between a scroll and a roll. Certainly one can throw a double scroll through the air. However, if someone were to attempt to cast a roll-shaped object, it tends to be more aerodynamic to fly, like a spear, a missile, a javelin. All right. Here is a visual of potentially what Zechariah saw. Notice in Zechariah 5:2 that this flying roll is provided dimensions. The length thereof is 20 cubits, and the breadth thereof 10 cubits. A cubit is an ancient biblical unit of measurement. Most have agreed that a cubit is equal to about 18 inches. So the length of the flying roll is 360 inches or 30 feet, while the breadth of or circumference is 180 inches or 15 feet. The reality should be sitting in right now that this is not an ancient scroll, nor even an ancient roll flying through the air. Zechariah 5:3. Then said he unto me, this is the curse that goes forth over the face of the whole earth. For everyone that steals shall be cut off as on the side according to it, and everyone that swears shall be cut off as on the other side according to it. Zechariah 5:3, okay, is a declaration of a coming judgment, which will be set upon the people of the earth. God is one who blesses as well as curses. The curse is designated against a certain people who perform certain acts that God is going to place judgment against. And then you'll recall, for everyone that steals and everyone that swears are the two sins. The word steals is translated from the Hebrew word ganab, which is defined to steal, steal away, or carry away. The word swears is transferred from the word shaba, which is defined to swear or take an oath. The word shall be cut off is translated from the Hebrew word naga, which is the definition of either to be made clean or impure, or it has an adverse definition to mean to be desolate, bare, or extirpated. With the flexibility of the definition of the Hebrew word naga, one can refer to verse 4 in order to figure which definition pertains to those people. Okay, so we'll go to verse 4. And I will bring it forth, saith the Lord of hosts, and it shall enter into the house of the thief, into the house of him that swears falsely by my name, and it shall remain in the midst of his house, and shall consume it with the timber thereof and the stones thereof. Look at that. Pretty hot. Zechariah 5:4 is a verse which needs to be used while interpreting verse 3. In verse 3, one knows that God will judge those that steal and swear. The details of the two sins are given more clarity in verse 4. Those that are stealing are as a thief. I believe that this can also be applied to those that steal from the truth, commit adultery, and even backbiters. Those that are swearing falsely by God's name can be understood to be worshipers of the false gods when these swearers say they are worshiping the true God or other gods. It can be all those that commit idolatry, putting worldly things above God, and even those that say they believe in Him. Basically, the two offenses can be applied to the entire 10 Commandments, which these people have violated. Okay. In verse 3, the word naga can be applied with both definitions from the above paragraph and applied to the phrase, shall be cut off as on that side according to it. The judgment will separate the good from the wicked. It will purge the righteous as clean and pure. People will fall on their knees because of this judgment and praise God and give their life to Him. While the purging, the wicked will be desolate and bare. Those that are wicked will have used up their time to repent, and judgment will then fall upon them. The judgment described in Zechariah 5:4 becomes more graphic or descriptive. Zechariah is told that it shall remain in the midst of his house. That seems to imply that the people will be caught unawares while they are at home living life as normal when this judgment enters into their houses. The rest of this verse indicates that this judgment will be something that will consume the natural things, such as timber and stone. Shall consume the timber thereof and the stones thereof. This judgment will have to be something of very intense heat level to consume stones. Verse 5 and 6, I'm going to read together out of Zechariah 5. Then the cherub angel that talked with me went forth and said unto me, Lift up now thine eyes and see what it is that goes forth. And I said, What is it? And he said, This is an ephah which goes forth. And he said, moreover, this is their resemblance through all the earth. All the earth has this resemblance of what is flying through the air. Zechariah is told in verse 5 to look up and see what it is that is going forth to bring judgment upon the earth. In verse 6, Zechariah looks up and sees something and asks, What is it? The cherub angel tells him that this thing is an ephah. This indicates that it's a resemblance over all the earth. Now, this which he sees flying can be found throughout the earth. The word ephah is a Hebrew name named ephah, which is defined as a unit of measurement for the Jewish people. It is similar to what the people of the United States know as a bushel. It is a unit of measurement, but also a container that is used to transport that item being harvested. Its approximate measurement is about 9 imperial gallons. Please avoid assuming that this is a bushel basket flying through the air, that which we have seen all over the world. No, that is not what is being implied here. Zechariah is describing visually what is being seen, and the angels gave him a visual example of the size and what it is. All right, now, verse 7 of Zechariah 5. And behold, there was lifted up a talent of lead, and this is a woman that sits in the midst of the ephah. Verse 7 of Zechariah 5 is the verse that so many theologians stumble upon and never really get this prophecy's true meaning. There are two very important words that are misinterpreted in this verse. A talent of lead was something that was well understood back in the days of Zechariah. However, the lead is not exactly what he saw. Lead is a basic element. There are isotopes that will decay down through time into their basic element. Plutonium is an isotope which is made from the isotope uranium. Both of these will break down to their basic element through time into their basic element lead. And the decay process of plutonium-239 produces uranium-235 as a daughter nucleotide. Lead-207 is a stable element produced at the end of this alpha decay chain. The complete decay chain is expressed in the following reaction. And look at this. And anybody that's aware of this type of mineralogy or decay chain will see that this is not crap. This is true. Since Zechariah would not have understood that plutonium was, nor even heard, since Zechariah would not have understood what plutonium was, nor even uranium, the messenger of God disclosed to him the basic element that he could understand. The word talent was a common unit of measurement of weight used back in that time. Since this unit of measure is not used today, there's only a vague weight equivalent, which can be estimated generally, it would be understood to be about 75 to 95 US pounds. So one can just summarize that this is a 70 to 95 pound plate of plutonium. Okay, does this make sense? Starting to kind of fall in place? A plutonium plate, not lead. Well, lead breaks down, or excuse me, plutonium breaks down to lead, but it's plutonium that is actually being shown here. I mean, what if Zechariah would write? They didn't even have a Hebrew name for plutonium, so what was it going to put? That's why they used the basic element, lead. Okay, to summarize what is known about this judgment so far, there is a 30-foot roll, which is about 15 feet in circumference, with a container the size of a bushel basket, with a 75 to 95 pound plate of plutonium in it. And the second phrase of Zechariah 5:7 is confusing to theologians and misinterpreted because of a word being plugged in by the English translations. The word woman is a mistranslation by all of the English translations. The translators were confused by a word in the Hebrew, which actually has two different lexicon references. English translators used Strong's H802 for the Hebrew word used isha, which is translated as a woman. The word that should have been translated is the Strong's H801 for the Hebrew word Isha. Spelt exactly the same, sounds almost identical, which is defined burnt offering, offered made with fire, fire offering. Okay? The lexicon did not exist back in the time of the translators. So all they had were two totally different definitions for the same word in the Hebrew manuscript. Obviously, the translators could not make sense of what fire offering had to do with a talent of lead within an ephah or basket, so they chose the woman. Apparently, fire in a basket with lead flying through the air was not as easy to explain as a woman in a basket with a talent of lead flying through the air. Kind of humorous to me, but now the modern day humanity has seen or heard of a nuclear missile and know what they are capable of. The translation using a fire offering makes much more sense now, doesn't it? I mean, come on now. A woman flying through the air with a plate of lead. Come on. And a basket. Give me a break. Theologians, I laugh when I hear theologians or pastors try to preach Zechariah 5 and say, Jesus kind of understand how a woman, it's all allegory, don't know what it means, a woman in there, something's going to happen bad, look what it says. Come on, use your hermeneutics. Use the information we have, the theology that we have, the lexicon and its words. How hard was it to go back one word to see if something was spelled similar? And it was. The same word with two different definitions, and it was just easy to explain. So here we have a proper interpretation of Zechariah 5. I'm going to go there, and we're going to just go another verse, I think, and then we'll be done with this Zechariah 5 prophecy. Verse 8. And he said, "This is wickedness." And he cast it into the midst of the ephah, and he cast the weight of the lead upon the mouth thereof. Actually, there's two more verses. Knowing proper English grammar, one needs to refer to a previous stated noun when referencing a pronoun. Does that make sense? Every pronoun references a noun before it. Otherwise, you won't know who that pronoun is. So, at the beginning of Zechariah 5:8, and he said, "This is wickedness." So what is wickedness? One needs to refer to the most previous noun known. What noun? One is to refer to the most previous noun to know what noun this, the word this, is referencing. A person usually can plug the noun with the word this as it should make sense. So we'll go back to verse 7. Sorry about that. Woman is the previous noun. The woman that sits in the midst of the ephah, this isn't the noun. The woman is this. The woman that sits in the midst of the ephah is the previous stated noun. The woman. So we go back. And we'll continue reading. This fire offering, we put fire offering in place of woman, is wickedness. Does that make sense now? This fire offering is wickedness. Right? Because we substituted fire offering, not woman. This woman is wickedness? How is this woman wickedness? She's just put in a basket. This fire offering is wickedness, right? Notice that the messenger cast the fire offering into the midst of the ephah, then cast the talent of plutonium on the mouth of the container. Zechariah uses the pronoun it to refer to the last noun used, which was the fire offering. For if it would have been a woman, he would have then cast her into the midst of the ephah, wouldn't he? So even the translators used it instead of her. What's up with that? Why didn't he say her if it was a woman? Stupid. I'm sorry for saying that, but it is. This woman would have been very awkward, casting a woman into the middle of a bushel basket and then cast a talent of lead on top of her to cover the basket. There was no mention of her screaming while being cast into a basket, was there? The fire offering is allegorical. So I misread that. I am going to revise this in my book. I will no longer say it's allegorical. Zechariah is giving you a literal description of what he is seeing. All right? There was no oral allegory in here. The fire offering that we're seeing here is, I'll explain it here, but it is a literal explanation of what's in the midst of the ephah. When it hits, it causes fire. So to show the prophecy correctly. It may be somewhat allegory, somewhat, but it is literal what happens. All right. I need to explain that a little better in here rather than just say it's allegorical, and I will. Sorry for that, but reading this over, I realize this, okay? Because I like to be exact, and I'm not saying exactly here. So, but God included this with being already in the container in order to represent that the fire was part of this container because of the outcome it was going to bring. And I need to explain that better. Verse 9 is the last verse that I'm going to tell you about Zechariah 5 because you can see this picture, right? Then lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, there came out 2 women, and the wind was in her wings, for they had wings like the wings of storks, and they lifted up the ephod between the earth and the heaven. It's pretty silly. 2 women again. Same word. Zechariah 5:9 continues with this same vision. When Zechariah looks up at this nuclear warhead and saw 2 fire offerings lifting the warhead off the ground, he recognizes that they had great swiftness, as if they had wind in their wings. The same mistake was made on the proper translation of Isha in this verse, whereas these are clearly 2 fire offerings, as one can see in the above photo, 2 fire offerings lifting the roll with the ephah in the air with great swiftness. Then lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, there came out 2 fire offerings, and the wind was in their wings, for they had wings like the wings of a stork. The warmongering nations of wickedness will be used against them as God uses these nuclear warheads for their destruction. All right, so that's where the judgment comes in. Where we're reading here in verse 10 and 11, the judgment of the nuclear exchanges that will happen, Wormwood and what have you. Zechariah 5 prophesied of it before John did. And you can see the prophecy in Zechariah resembles what's going to be happening during this prophecy coming fulfilled per Revelation, right? It coincides right along with each other. It is a nuclear exchange. We'll go to verse 12. And the 4th angel sounded, and 3rd part of the sun was smitten, and 3rd part of the moon, and the 3rd part of the stars, so as the 3rd part of them was darkened, and the day shone not for a 3rd part of it, and the night likewise. As the 4th angel sounded the 4th trumpet judgment, results of the nuclear exchanges will have already occurred. The atmosphere of the earth will be filled with smoke from the fire and the blasts. As a result of all the smoke, the brightness of the sun will be smitten, which is actually indicating the sun had been struck. This is an observation by John, as to think that the sun was the one that was affected, but that will not be the case. It will be the smoke that causes that will have affected the ability to see the brightness of the sun, moon, and stars. Do you understand that? Between the great earthquakes and the tremendous impacts of the many nuclear blasts upon the earth, and I must add the volcanoes, the planet will have shaken itself off of its normal axis. Therefore, the Earth rotation will be 2/3 of its normal rotation. The daylight and the night light will be 1/3 less. There will be 16-hour days. Now, you remember in science class, we used to take a flashlight in the dark and show the globe and show how the sun hits the globe, and this part is daylight and this part is night over here. Picture that. The earth is slanted slight on its normal axis. Well, with the shaking going on and the earthquakes and what have you, the earth's going to tilt even more, causing its rotation. It's still revolving, right? Still rotating, but it's revolving and turning around the sun. The sun shining on the earth is going to cause the nights and days to shorten. You're going to have 8 hours of sunshine and 8 hours of darkness on the earth. And that is what adds up to 16 hours, 16-hour days, because 1/3 part of the light and the dark, 4 hours of each, adding up to 8 hours. 24 minus 8 is 16-hour days. that is the result of what's already happened on the earth. Okay, you got to understand this is science as well as theology. All right, and it's explained by the events that are going to be occurring. Uh, and some of this is kind of vague. And how can this possibly happen to where the Earth's rotation is changed so much that the days are shortened? And you'd have to experiment with the light and how it's shining on the Earth, and how you have in this rotation, it's got 8 hours of sunshine and 8 hours of moonlight. I mean, it's gonna be tilted in such a way. In Revelation 6:13 and Isaiah 34:4, the stars of the second heaven will have fallen. This fourth trumpet judgment brings to light that not all stars will have fallen, which I think Revelation 6:13, Isaiah 34:4 had implied, while only 2/3 of their light will be seen. The smoke will allow light to pass through the Earth's atmosphere, so that 1/3 of the light is blocked, just as in this case for the moon as well. So there are still stars in the sky because John's mentioning that they're there, they can't be seen. So when the judgment of Revelation 6:13 happens, there'll be still some stars left on the earth, or I'm sorry, left in the sky, because it said all stars in Isaiah 34:4, I believe it does, which coincides with actually Revelation 14 through 20, or 19 and 20. So keep in mind, we've got science going on here, and we have to use our common sense too. One place that says all stars, this place says that there's still going to be some stars. So we have to take into consideration we've got what John's seeing, and what trying to think. John saw it, and then where else do I got here? And Isaiah seeing it. So Isaiah saw it one way, John saw it another way. This is something that's never happened before. So he's describing it in a way. He sees these stars falling. It seems like all of them. And so you have to. So I have this a little bit explained in Revelation 6. What is that? 13. So go back to chapter 6 of this study, and you'll be able to see how I explain it. All right. Okay. So we're going to move on. I think this is the last verse of the chapter. Revelation 8:13. And I beheld and heard an angel flying through the midst of the heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, by reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the three angels, which are yet to sound. Now John beheld, he saw a cherub angel flying through the midst of the heaven, first heaven. That's the first heaven, which says midst of heaven, not God's heaven, not the moon, sun, moon, and stars heaven, the second heaven, first heaven. The first heaven is the earth atmosphere. So there's angels flying through the first heaven, the earth's atmosphere. Okay. John also heard that angel saying, Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth. The Greek word oi, I think is how you say it, I don't know, sure, is translated as woe. When spoken 3 times, it magnifies its meaning. Its meaning is simply a warning. Okay. One should say in English, warning, warning, warning. Okay, so that's what woe means. It means warning in order to convey the intent and effect of the 3 words together. The triple warning will have been given because the last 3 trumpet judgments were going to be much worse for those still alive on the earth. And believe me, they are. When we get to chapter 9, you'll say, wow, this is terrible. Because you think this is bad so far. Whoa, the trumpet of the 3 angels, which are yet to sound, is why the woes come in, as you can see. So that concludes chapter 8. And going into chapter 9, it's very, very upsetting to imagine the trumpet judgment of the 5th and 6th angels, cherubim. It's almost like it's just almost unreal how this could happen, but it's going to happen. And there's so much theology here, so many events happening simultaneously, because the 5th trumpet judgment is still happening fifth and sixth trumpets blow on the same day, 12/12/61. As soon as the fifth trumpet blows, that specific judgment is starting to happen. But the sixth trumpet cannot start happening, even though it blows. That time frame can't happen until the I think it's 5 months transpires first, and you'll see why. The logic. I hope I keep you at the edge of your seats, because the thing that happens in the fifth trumpet judgment has a timeline, time constraint that can't be happening at the same time as the sixth trumpet. So they will still all blow on the same day, 1261, including the seventh trumpet will still blow on day 1261. And I will explain that as we get to them. But we're still it's all unfolding now. Once they've been blown, the progression starts on day 1261. It keeps going, right? And so it's going to lay out the rest of the 3.5 years. Like I said, the only one that doesn't start on day 1261 but still gets blown is the sixth trumpet judgment. Okay, so it's interesting theology. Whoa, what's coming? Okay, so until tomorrow, hopefully I can get to this chapter 9 tomorrow. I hope you enjoyed chapter 8 and learned something. God bless you. Thank you for joining me, and may the Lord keep opening your eyes to the new things you're learning in my studies. Okay, until then, may God bless you.